Hi everyone, this is Jenny. Welcome back to my channel, and I want to thank you all so much for your comments recently on my BookTube newbie tag video. Everyone's really welcoming, as many people have said before in this community, and I thank you all very much for your warm welcome and your comments. And today I'm here to talk to you about recent reads that I've just finished. I'm going to take these books back to the library this week, so I wanted to talk about them quickly before I did that. The first one I want to talk about is Vanessa and Her Sister by Priya Parmar. This is a story based in England from 1905 to 1912, and is based on the Bloomsbury Group. So obviously there are many famous members of the Bloomsbury Group: E.M. Forster, Virginia Woolf, and my favorites are Linton Strachey. And I first became aware of the Bloomsbury Group after watching a film called Carrington, which was a 1990s film starring Emma Thompson and Jonathan Pryce as Linton Strachey. So this book is focused on Vanessa Bell, who was originally named Vanessa Stephen, and she was Virginia Woolf's older sister, so Virginia Stevens, and they also had two brothers, and so surviving. They did have other siblings who died before this novel is set. It is done in kind of an epistolary fashion. There's letters, there's telegrams, and there's journal entries from Vanessa. So it really does focus on Vanessa's point of view. She is the one who drives the novel, and so you learn about Virginia through Vanessa's perspective. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. It is a very interesting look, obviously fictionalized. This is taking real people and making their lives into fiction. The behind the scenes. She did use, as much factual evidence as she could to create the timeline, which I really appreciated. And the other thing I really appreciated about this is that, Carrington, the film, begins right when Dora Carrington and Linton Strachey meet, which is on the eve of World War I, and this book ends just at that point. And so it focuses more on the beginnings of the group and when the group was the most vibrant, and the interrelationships. They were all kind of in love with each other and sleeping with each other at different points in time. It focuses on how Clive Bell courted Vanessa and convinced her to marry him. It also talks about Virginia Woolf's mental illness. And I did hear a few people who were reviewing this book say that they felt that perhaps the author had not represented Virginia Woolf accurately. They seemed to think that potentially this book was too harsh on Virginia Woolf, and I didn't feel that at all. I didn't get that impression from her. What I felt was seeing a sibling relationship, and a sibling relationship in where one sister, namely Vanessa, who was a painter, is constantly being torn from her life in order to help Virginia with hers, because obviously Virginia did commit suicide. We all know that, and she was a brilliant genius writer, and we all know that. But somewhere in the middle of there was her struggle with mental illness that she had all her life, and this book portrays it as being something that she dealt with all her life, and that her siblings helped her deal with as best they could, and also were frustrated by when they wanted to live their lives and have some happiness and have something that was just theirs, but instead they were helping Virginia with her struggles. So I thought that was really well represented and really interesting. And the book is, it's a fairly easy read. There's nothing super complicated about it, and I really got drawn into it. I got drawn into the story and drawn into the characters. There are a lot of characters. And it also includes Roger Fry, who was instrumental in setting up the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And at first, you're just hearing about some letters from Roger Fry to his mother and to his wife, and you're wondering why you're hearing about that. But you do have to kind of hang in there, and then eventually he works his way into the story. So I would highly recommend this if you like books about artists, books about people, obviously, wealthy, quite privileged people who are challenging social class conventions of their time. So, Vanessa and Her Sister. While I was reading Vanessa and Her Sister, I was also reading this poetry collection called This is a Small Northern Town, and it's by Rosanna Deerchild. Rosanna Deerchild is from the South Indian Lake town in Manitoba, and she is from the Cree First Nation of Canada. This is a lovely little volume. These poems are very self-reflective. They talk a lot about her childhood and growing up in the small northern town, her impressions of the other people who lived there, but it's very personal. So it goes into her childhood with her family, different family members, different experiences with religion, with kind of outside culture coming into her own culture. Also just little parts of what it means to live in the North. I'll read you the first poem in the collection, which is called How to Hunt Moose. Drawn from the Northland, we were pine tree limbs, soil-colored skin, slender jackfish, taught us how to play, our language clear like the water. But it's hard with kids. No husband, mama divides her kids up, takes 2 jobs, waits for a house to open up. At the cafe, she cooks endless bacon and eggs for hunters that come off the plain from down south. That's where she meets him. He's come up north to kill a moose, laughs when mama says that's her last name. His blue eyes intent, dangerous, hit her like a bullet. So yeah, it's a lovely collection. I would definitely recommend it. Great book. And the last recent read I wanted to talk about is Purge by Sophie Oksanen. This Sophie Oksanen is a Finnish author, but this novel is set in Estonia and Russia. This book was part of Mel's Bookland Adventures Read Around the World Book Club, which I have been participating in all year. I haven't read every single book for every month. A lot of it depends on my level of interest for the book, my time, and then my other reading goals. I was very intrigued by this one, and my library had it. So those are kind of the criteria of whether I read along every month or not, is also whether the library has the books. I should probably tell you who translated this. It was translated from the Finnish by Lola Rogers. I thought this was fantastic. It is certainly very, very raw. So if you have triggers for sexual abuse, I would say definitely tread lightly around this book. It is about using the weapons that are used against women in wartime and in times of turmoil. So as you can imagine, that is usually linked to sexual abuse. It is about a older lady, Alide, I'm not exactly sure how you would pronounce her name correctly, and Zara, and Zara is a younger woman, and it is how their lives interconnect. I don't want to give too much away about the plot because I think the plot is done brilliantly. It moves quite. Some people thought it moved slowly, but I felt this moved at quite a great pace. You build. You always know that something's beneath the surface. You always feel the tension in the story, but I didn't find that overwhelming or difficult. It didn't make it difficult for me to read. It just made me want to keep going to find out what happened. I gave this 4 stars. I would have given it 5 stars, but I was a little bit disappointed in the main love triangle in this story. I don't want to give too much away about the plot, so I'm trying to tread lightly in my words, but it's a struggle between siblings, a love triangle between siblings, and I found that to be a little bit of an easy way out for the plot to move. I think that the conflict that pushed the sisters apart could have been done with a couple of other motivations, and the love triangle would not have been necessary. I'm a little bit wary of reading stories like this that pit the women against each other. And I know that that's also a product of the time period. So you are talking about the late 30s, I believe. And yeah, late 30s into the early 40s. And obviously, relationships between women at that time were more about competition for men. I understand that logically in my mind, but also being someone who has a sister and someone who has matured from someone that was quite, I would say I was pretty boy crazy when I was younger. I felt like some of the motivations that she put into Alide's head were a bit far and just pushed that obsession, that love triangle a bit too far. And especially given the nature of the political climate and the unrest that was happening in the society at the time, I just thought, I don't know if that's really accurate. So I loved the story though, in all other aspects. The other part that I didn't really like was the end, where she just kind of throws in some top secret government manifesto or government files that we're supposed to read and get some sort of insight, I guess, into the other part of the story. But I felt that it was really unnecessary, that like what we needed to keep focusing on was that relationship between the women, because that was the brilliance of this story. And the other thing I would have liked is a little bit more on Ingel's story. So she there's a huge chunk of her life that is not put in here, and I know that we were supposed to see that through Zara's story, but I felt it was a little bit cruel or a little bit unfair to keep Ingel's perspective so limited in this story. I feel like she should have had a little bit more space than Hans, the husband / object of desire. So, have you read this book? Do you have an opinion about it? Do you have an opinion about Vanessa and Her Sisters, or This is a Small Northern Town? I'd love to chat to you about these books, and I will be back very soon with another edition of Recent Reads, and thanks so much for watching.